Good afternoon. Welcome to the policy meeting of the Phoenix City Council. I'll call the meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilwoman Ansari.
Here.
Councilwoman Guardado.
Here.
Councilwoman Hodge-Washington.
Here.
Councilwoman O'Brien.
Here.
Councilwoman Pastor. Councilman Robinson.
Here.
Councilman Waring. Vice Mayor Stark.
Here.
Mayor Gallego.
Here. Thank you. We'll begin with council information and follow-up requests. Why don't we start with Councilwoman Ann O'Brien, followed by Councilwoman Ansari.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Today marks the start of our community court program in Phoenix. It is a significant milestone in our ongoing efforts to address homelessness. Over the past 2 years, my office has been researching homelessness issues and potential solutions. I released a plan 6 months ago which detailed possible policies, programs, and partnerships the city could look into. In that plan, we called for a community court modeled after successful and similar courts here at home and across the country as a valuable tool in combating homelessness in our city. This court will give an option to people who committed low-level crimes that are homeless, receive help, or go through the judicial system. We can hold people accountable for their crimes while being compassionate for their individual situations. This court does that. In today's first session, we had a person accept services, and staff is currently working on finding them housing. I'm honored to bring this important option forward, and I'm appreciative of all the hard work that staff put to bring this to reality today. I look forward to the positive impact our community court program will have on the lives of those in need. In other news, the legislative session began yesterday, and my office is closely monitoring bills that impact our community and will keep you informed on all state bills affecting Phoenix in my weekly newsletter. If you're not signed up for my newsletter, you can sign up at Phoenix.gov /D1. Also, if you would like to register to exercise your voice at the state legislature, you can call my office and we will ensure you get signed up with instructions on how to make your voice heard. This year, I will be running legislation focused on trying to bring back the missing middle and first-time homebuyer product that has been absent in our state for nearly a decade. As a result of unintended consequences from some past state law changes, new affordable and attainable duplex, triplex, and condo communities have stopped being built in a for-sale capacity. In my proposal, which is bipartisan legislation, I hope to bring that product back to the market and bring Phoenix residents closer to obtaining home ownership. Again, follow my newsletter to stay informed on the efforts. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. We'll go to Councilwoman Ansari, followed by Councilwoman Guardado.
Thank you, Mayor. The District 7 office has been hard at work. Last week, we held a community meeting to update residents on the ongoing Department of Justice investigation and all of the reform efforts that the city is making with our police department. I want to thank Chief Assistant City Attorney TJ Martin and Assistant Police Chief Brian Chapman for a truly informative presentation. There are meetings that are taking place all across the city in January and February, so we really want to encourage the community to go out and attend. You can find the meeting closest to you at Phoenix.gov /DOJ for more information. Last Friday, I also got to join former mayors, arts advocates, the Corona family, and a huge audience at the Orpheum to celebrate the 95th anniversary of the theater. One of Phoenix's most iconic and historic buildings. Here's to hopefully another century of laughs, tears, and growing our thriving art scene. Next slide. This last summer, I got to travel with Mayor Gallego to Asia, and Phoenix Sister Cities put together a diverse delegation to visit one of our very new sister cities, which is Suwon, South Korea. And we're really excited because Mayor Lee Jae-jun will be coming back this week and visiting the city of Phoenix. So we'll be welcoming our sister city delegation back here. Next slide. And finally, we just wanted to do a quick overview of upcoming events that myself and the District 7 team will be at. This Saturday, January 13th, we have the Redeem Neighborhoods Cleanup event at 7 a.m. We will be at the Academy of Math and Science Desert Sky Resource Market at 10 a.m. And on Monday, we will be celebrating MLK Day at the March and Festival. Thank you so much. That's all for me.
Thank you. We'll go next to Councilwoman Guardado, followed by Councilwoman Pastor.
Thank you, Mayor, and Happy New Year to everyone. And as we kick off our first policy meeting for 2024, I wanted to take a moment to extend my warmest wishes once again for a Happy New Year to each and every one of you. May this year be filled with prosperity, success, and happiness for all. Before we get started, I wanted to express my heartfelt appreciation for the incredible year we had in 2023, filled with vibrant community events and heartwarming moments. From the excitement of El Grito, which had 13,000 attendees, to the vibrant atmosphere at the Maryville Mercado, Bavazo, our turkey giveaway, and the Maryville Jobs and Resource Fair, and more. Each event was a huge success. And let's not forget about our grand finale, the 4th annual Very Merry Maryville. It was an absolute joy to witness over 1,200 children receiving toys and enjoying a delicious meal with their families. The smiles on their faces were priceless, and it was all made possible because of the unwavering support of the community and the City of Phoenix staff. Let us carry this momentum forward into the new year with your continued commitment and hard work. I am confident that we will achieve even greater heights for the City of Phoenix and District 5. I am truly grateful to have such an outstanding team, dedicated individuals who work tirelessly to make Phoenix an even more remarkable place to live, work, and play. And just some great news on the new areas that we inherited in our district. We're already talking to neighbors there, and we are getting ready to start some petitions and start getting some speed humps over there in that area on 75th Avenue behind Desert Sky Mall. We welcome all of the new residents that will be representing this year and are excited to work together hand in hand with all of them. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Pastor.
Thank you, Mayor. Happy New Year. I'll wait for my slides. Okay, thank you. The new district boundaries that we have voted on in September are now in full effect, and D4 is welcoming about 10,000 new residents. We started working with a few of our new neighborhoods last year, and we are thrilled to continue our outreach. Next slide. Join us for our coffee chat on the west side of the district next week at Neveria El Otazo. The Office of Heat Response and Mitigation will be joining us to discuss tree and shade grants, and the Public Works Department will share new solid waste initiatives and introduce the neighborhood specialists to their neighborhood. Next slide. We celebrate the opening of the first ever literacy garden at Carl Hayden High School last month. As a former teacher, I know how critical reading is for students, and having the dedicated space like the Literacy Garden can help encourage students to develop a lifelong love of reading. Thank you to Phoenix Union Superintendent Thea Andrade, Carl Hayden Principal Dr. Julio Rubio, social worker Yannick Schleifer, and all of our other community partners who helped us create this safe space. Councilwoman Hodge Washington and I welcome the U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra to Bioscience High School. Secretary Becerra toured the campus and had a discussion with students about sustainability and climate change. I'm thrilled to have had this opportunity to show off their impressive work happening at Bioscience and at Phoenix Union. Sky Harbor was recently recognized as the best airport in the U.S. by the Wall Street Journal. Our biggest airport was recognized for its outstanding customer service and our innovative partnership. Congratulations to our aviation team. In spirit of the MLK Day of Service, our African American Reconstruction Group will be doing a neighborhood cleanup at 51st Avenue in McDowell with our constituents on January 27th. I'm excited to announce my newest partnership with Vincier Cancer Center, Cornell University, and Columbia University. For Black History Month, we will launch a blood test to detect breast cancer, specifically in Black women who have denser tissue and are 41% more likely to pass away from breast cancer than their white counterparts. Density is a problem in a normal mammogram, which makes it unable to detect in early stages of cancer. The Northwest Extension Phase 2 is opening very soon, and it will connect 19th Avenue and Dunlap to Metro Center, the Delda Williams Center. Some new features include 3 new light rail stations, a new park and ride garage, and 200 new trees. This is very exciting, and I'm looking forward to celebrating the opening on January 27th from 9 to 12 p.m. at the Delta Williams Transit Center. What happens when I read fast. December 27th marked the 15th anniversary of the light rail. The past 15 years were a whirlwind of hard work. We've expanded so much since the opening of light rail. We're getting ready to open the second Northwest extension. We're more than 75% done with the South Central extension, and we're working on extending further to the west side of Phoenix. I'm honored to continue building a more rider-friendly and well-connected Phoenix as the chair of Light Rail. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman. Any additional council updates? Thank you. City Manager, do you have any updates before we go to the main event?
I do not, Mayor.
Wonderful. Well, then I will turn it to our city clerk for the 24-hour paragraph.
The title of the following ordinance and resolution number on the agenda was available to the public at least 24 hours prior to this council meeting and therefore may be read by title or agenda item only. Ordinance number G7217.
Thank you. And City Clerk, do we need a second roll call to introduce this item?
No, Mayor.
Wonderful. Well, item number 1 is related to prevailing wage. Thank you to everyone who has been working so hard and participated in our stakeholder process, led by our City Manager, Jeff Barton. I will turn it over to him.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Good afternoon. First and foremost, I want to say over the last 18 to 24 months, you have shown a determination to make sure that employees of the City of Phoenix are taken care of from a financial perspective, as well as making sure that their treatment is adequate, fair, and just. That today extends to now contractors with today's discussion, who are also by proxy City of Phoenix employees when they're working on city projects. And so, you know, your direction that you've given us over the last couple of months as we worked on this and identified individual stakeholders to work on this project with us has been extremely helpful, and we're happy and excited about the process that we went through. We're also excited about the ordinance that we're bringing forward to you today, and we think it is something that, again, we knew we weren't going to please everyone. I think that's the art of crafting a deal. You know you're not going to have parties happy on either side, but I think we found something that kind of sits in the middle, and it does achieve the goals that we set out to achieve when you provided us the direction back in April of 2023. So just by way of history, before I turn it over to staff, again, on March 22nd, the original prevailing wage ordinance was adopted by this council. There were some concerns that were expressed by staff, and we'll talk about some of those concerns in a second. April 19th, that ordinance was repealed. However, at the time that you repealed it, it wasn't as though you just kind of washed your hands with it. You adopted the 8-hour rule, which directed staff to find a way forward, and you identified stakeholders to work with us on that process, both stakeholders on both sides of the conversation, contractors as well as our labor groups. And what we were trying to achieve in that process that we went through over the last, I'd say, you know, starting in April, but realistically, we started our focus groups in August and went through November. So we had 6 focus groups working with the individuals that you identified to find an option and an ordinance that would better withstand legal challenge, that would also incorporate stakeholder input to the extent that we could, but would also provide a phased approach so that we would minimize the unintended impact on the City of Phoenix. And I'll talk about a few of those unintended impacts of the original ordinance in a second. But we also wanted to make sure, and I committed to each and every one of you at that meeting on April 19th, that I would get you something that we could consider by the end of the calendar year. And we did deliver on providing you with an ordinance and some research materials by the end of November. So we actually beat our deadline, and I'd like to thank staff for that. With me for today's presentation, though, I do want to recognize Derek Lavelle from the City Attorney's Office, Eric Froberg from the Streets and Transportation Department, as well as Amber Williamson from Budget and Research. So the March 23rd ordinance that I referenced, as I talked about, there were some concerns that were addressed and brought forward by staff, and I'd just like to talk to you about a few of those before I turn it over to City Engineer Eric Froberg. First and foremost, the original ordinance included repair and non-construction work. So though that original ordinance would have extended itself into our operating budget and would not have limited itself to simply construction projects, I believe, based on the conversations that I've had with folks, as well as even some of the council members, that that was an unintended consequence of the original ordinance. And by being able to scale back from those, we did reduce the financial or economic impact of the ordinance that will be presented to you today. We also were concerned about the administrative burden, not just on the internal city staff, but also on the individuals that would be bidding on prospective city construction projects at a threshold of $250,000. And so this ordinance today, we will be raising or recommending that we raise that threshold significantly above $250,000, but there is a method to the madness, and Eric Froberg will talk about that. We also were concerned that the city, to really accomplish what was intended in the original ordinance, the city would have to actually engage in directing wage determination studies. And as you know, look how long it took for us to get through our own class and comp study. It would take almost as long to do that. So again, we wanted to find some way to do this in a way that would be fast and that would be quick and remediate the issues and the challenges that you were trying to solve. And then we also were worried about the unintended consequence of this extending beyond the city of Phoenix and going into private work and work that's outside of the city's purview. And so we wanted to make sure that what we're trying to do pertains to us and not outside contract work. And then finally, as you know, we've spent the better part of the last year before we had our successful 2023 bond program, which I'm super excited about, having been former budget director, as I tell you all the time. But again, when we developed that bond program, there was no knowledge of the impact that a prevailing wage would have on the construction costs of those items that would be in our bond program. So we were extremely worried about being able to deliver the things that we promised our residents when they went out to the election to vote on that November ballot. And so we are recommending that we exclude the 2023 bond program from this ordinance. And again, future bond programs would be subject to it, but as of today, what we're recommending before you today, so that we can continue to deliver our promises to our residents that voted on that successful bond passage, that we would exclude the 2023 bond program from this prevailing wage ordinance. And there are some other items that we will address that Eric will provide additional detail as we go through this presentation. But again, I want to thank you. I want to thank our stakeholders who engaged us in this process. I learned a lot. I think they learned a lot. And I think our staff definitely learned a lot. And it was time well spent. And we do have something today that I'm confident could work in our current environment. So I'll pass it on to Eric.
Thanks, Jeff. Madam Mayor, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to come speak to you today. It's exciting after these months worth of work to then bring you the culmination of that, which is this draft ordinance for your consideration today. But before we get into kind of the particulars of this particular draft ordinance, we thought it made sense to kind of go back and kind of like, where did this start from? Where did prevailing wage start? So more than 90 years ago, federal government passed the Davis-Bacon Act. The intent of that was to avoid low bid contractors from kind of suppressing local wages. So the federal government since then this has continued on, and we are very good on our our federally funded projects at doing these Davis-Bacon stuff. As I said, it is just for currently the Davis-Bacon Act is just for our federally funded projects. They do utilize the Federal Department of Labor does those surveys for us, as Jeff was talking about, right? They do the surveys that then determine what the minimum wages should be, including fringe benefits, and they are broken out by job classification. And the Davis-Bacon Act does include the compliance reporting and the enforcement provisions within those that we do enforce on our federally funded projects. There are local funded or local prevailing wage acts around the country that can be passed by state or local entities. They do help to prevent, or they may help to prevent payroll fraud as they go forward with certified payrolls. But a lot of those then utilize the federal wage determinations that are in there. So as Jeff talked about, many agencies just rely on the federal government's wage determinations going forward as a way to make them a little bit more efficient. So what are some of the implications of a local prevailing wage? Higher construction costs are one that many worry about and talk about. These are difficult to quantify because once you implement a local prevailing wage, you don't have an apples to apples comparison anymore of what the contract would have cost before the prevailing wage was instituted. So we would be able to compare to previous years and those types of things of similar type projects, but to be able to say definitively that the project cost X amount more or less is difficult because we would then be working with a new set of wage rates. Potentially higher construction or higher quality construction projects, right? When you pay higher wages, the thought is that then you have higher skilled labor working on those projects. There would be a need for additional staffing and monitoring. I have a small group right now that does all the contract monitoring for our current federally funded projects. So if this were to pass and expand, there would be a need for additional staff to go out and do the compliance monitoring and enforcement. And then, of course, there are impacts that we heard from the labor and the contractors about what they feel the impacts would be of this if it were to pass. And as Jeff talked about, we did have 6 different meetings, 3 with each of the groups. We'll kind of just go over some of the highlights of what we heard from each of those groups. So first from the labor group, that laborers deserve to be paid a livable wage, that the current rates that the contractors are paying, those may not persist, right? If there becomes a recession, then there would be ability then for the contractors to pay less. That labor brokers can hire independent contractors to avoid paying proper wages and benefits. That skilled labor is vital for complex projects. That skilled laborers require robust apprenticeship programs. That prevailing wage ordinances must have some repercussions. They can't just be written down on paper. There has to be some type of enforcement that goes along with that. That applying Davis-Bacon to all city projects would be sufficient, as that was their hope, and that local prevailing wages ordinances are legal. So that's what we heard from the labor side. We had 3 other meetings with the contractors. They basically said that they are already paying at or above those prevailing wages. That certified payrolls are kind of unnecessarily burdensome for all the contractors. That this could be obstacles for small businesses or minority-owned, women-owned businesses that just don't have the administrative capabilities at this point because it generally this isn't required. That a local prevailing wage ordinance would be found illegal by the courts. That contractors' in-house apprenticeship programs are on par with the state-approved programs. That the prevailing wage would increase the city's administrative costs coming with enforcement and compliance and monitoring, and that the city's current contract already has a stipulation in there that forbids labor broker practices. So we gathered all of that information from the various groups, and we looked at it, as Jeff talked about, as having to bring this in as a phased approach. As you know, we talk about a lot how big the city's CIP is, so to go from a pretty small percentage of our CIP, about 10%, to all of the CIP overnight would be challenging, to say the least. So we looked at it from a phased approach, and really the phased approach had 3 different reasons for it. One was to ensure that I could hire the right staff and train them at a realistic pace for this to be successful. It would help us to identify and avoid some uncontrolled project costs as this would start. And it would really allow us to, in smaller increments, kind of assess the impacts that we heard from the labor groups and the contractors about what the actual impacts would be. So, as you go through and you looked in the draft provision or the draft ordinance, there are some provisions in there that would help us, that we put in there purposely to help us make this a successful ordinance if we were to enact it. And one is, we would like to utilize the Department of Labor's current prevailing wage determinations and not have to come up with our own. It would be subject to the trades identified in the Davis-Bacon Act. It would, of course, forbid independent contractor misclassification, and that was something that both groups were supportive of. Weekly certified payroll submittals, that would follow along again with what Davis Bacon, what my labor compliance specialists are already doing. It would provide me with a 60-day limit to do investigations if there were any complaints from, and sometimes those happen, and we would then have a timeline about how soon and how quickly we would have to address those. But to do those would also provide us, and the contractors would then provide us access to their payrolls and staff, and going out and being able to do the interviews that we would need to do. And it also has some corrective action language in there, and then some penalties for non-compliance. So with any good ordinance, right, if there aren't any penalties, it's hard to enforce. So there are penalties in there for some non-compliance. So finally, to the specifics of this draft ordinance and what would be what we are proposing in here is that it would be for just Title 34 construction contracts. So Title 34 is the state law that lays out the procurement for construction contracts. So beginning July 1, if this were to be enacted, is when we would start. It would be for projects in excess of $4 million. That does also coincide with excluding the JOC contracts. And as Jeff talked about, the initial one at $250,000, this is an increase on that. But what we tried to do is we looked at the $4 million and matching it with our JOC limit. JOCs, we do a high number of JOCs, but for a very small dollar amount in comparison to the rest of the CIP. So the intent is in this first phase to kind of hit the big dollar projects, the one that would have the most bang for the buck and not be so administratively burdensome that the chances of success go down. As Jeff talked about, it would exclude the GEO bond. Again, that was the 2023 GEO bond, and that was just purely a function of making sure that the cost that we estimated for the GEO bond when it went out originally would be true. Would exclude affordable housing in an effort to that remaining affordable. Would exclude any public infrastructure reimbursement agreements that we have. And it does have an exception in there for re-advertisement if we end up having if a project comes in, sometimes the number of submittals we get isn't sufficient. This would allow us to then go back out, maybe without the prevailing wage ordinance in effect, to see if that was really maybe the reason that that we didn't get enough competition in that. So those are the details. I'll now turn it over to Amber, and she'll talk about some of the budgetary impacts.
Thank you, Eric. Mayor and Council, so there would be a budgetary impact if Council were to pass a prevailing wage ordinance, both to our operating budget as well as to our capital improvement program. Starting with the operating budget, as Eric has mentioned, approximately 12 positions would be needed if the ordinance were to pass, costing roughly $1.4 million per year. Those would be charged out to projects, and about $100,000 in one-time costs. Also, city staff evaluated the most recent council-approved CIP and took the parameters of the ordinance proposed before you today and have determined that roughly an average annual impact of possibly $17 million could occur. However, that is based on some subjective assumptions. As Eric mentioned earlier in the presentation, it would be difficult for us to actually definitively tell you what that impact is because we wouldn't know what those projects would have been bidded out absent a prevailing wage ordinance. Also, if the ordinance were to be legally challenged, there would be additional costs associated with litigation. And that does conclude our presentation, and staff can answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you for all your work on this. Councilwoman Guardado.
Thank you, Mayor. Before going to the motion, I'm going to go into some comments. So I just wanted to take a moment to highlight the numerous advantages that prevailing wage ordinance brings both to employees and the overall economy. By implementing prevailing wage ordinances, we ensure that workers receive fair pay, benefits, and safe working conditions. This is not only guarantees a happier workforce, but also contributes to the growth and prosperity of our economy. It should go without saying, but it is important to note that we will never be able to have meaningful conversations about affordable housing, ending homelessness, without recognizing the need to, at the very least, to pay our employees a living wage. If we want to make sure that workers have a place to live, that they are able to pay their bills, that they don't have to decide between paying their rent or putting food on the table, and we want to make sure that they don't end up homeless, we need to make sure that we're paying them a prevailing wage. And I think this is another way where we are making sure that we have that comprehensive approach on how is it that we end homelessness. While there may be concerns about increased costs for labor on construction projects, it's important to note that these costs are often offset by significant improvements in worker productivity, safety standards, and job waste reduction. In fact, many studies have shown that projects completed under prevailing wage guidelines experience a reduced time on the job due to enhanced efficiencies. The long-term benefits of investing in fair compensation for our workers far outweigh any short-term cost concerns. By providing employees with higher wages and better benefits, we create a positive cycle of economic growth and job satisfaction. And I also wanted to take a moment to express my appreciation to city staff and City Manager Jeff Barden for their work on prevailing wage, and to our labor leaders for your unwavering dedication in advocating for the passage of prevailing wage to the City of Phoenix. City Manager Jeff Barden, thank you so much for your tireless commitment to this cause. Your leadership and determination have been instrumental in bringing us closer to achieving fair living wages, improved benefits, and safe working conditions for labor across all sectors. It is truly inspiring to witness your passion in action. So thank you so much for all of your work. Also to Amber, to Eric, to Derek, thank you guys so much for all of your hard work as well and bringing this so fast to us. Thank you for everything that you guys have done. To my staff, to Mike Wangulo from my office who worked on the language, thanking him as well for working with all the different labor groups and working with our city manager to bring this forward. To our labor leaders, I want to extend a sincere thank you. Your unwavering commitment to this cause has played a pivotal role in driving positive change within our community. Your advocacy has given a voice to those who deserve fair treatment and have paved the way towards a more equitable future. Yay for unions. By passing prevailing wage today, we are sending a clear message that we value our labor force and recognize their invaluable contributions to our city growth and prosperity. And as a former housekeeper, as a former labor leader, I want to make a motion to approve item 1, prevailing wage ordinance G7217.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Councilwoman Guardado and a second from Councilwoman Pastor. Additional comments? Councilwoman Pastor.
Yes, I have some comments. Actually, it's a long time coming. We started this conversation June 2020, and there was a request for an 8-hour rule to look into this, and it failed. And then I filed a reconsideration in July 1 to 2020, and that failed. So, and then we went October 2021, it failed. March 2023, it passed. April 2023, it was repealed, and here we are today. And luckily, we were, at that time, April 2023, we were fighting to get it to the AG's office. And then June 2023, the AG came out with her ruling. What a day. 4 years it's taken, and it demonstrates how policy moves very slowly, how it also takes a greater effort and a bigger effort and a big conversation with not only labor, but also with the business industry and those that are part of the industry. So I want to thank everybody that was part of this conversation, because everybody's opinion, comments were included and looked at in order to draft something really in the best light of our city. The other thing that I want to say is I want to thank staff, because it's sometimes very difficult when you're a staff member and we sit on the political side and they're not understanding what's happening, what's moving, and why are things going the way they are. So I want to thank staff for their patience. I also want to thank two other they're no longer here with the city, but I also want to thank them. Andrew Wonder and Adriana Garcia, they put some sweat, and Dulce Rivas put some sweat and tears into doing research and making sure this happened. And so there are a number of people to thank, but those are the ones that I'm thanking at this moment. And hopefully we pass this. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Councilwoman Ansari and then Councilman Waring.
Thank you, Mayor. I am equally excited about the prospect of this ordinance hopefully being successful today. As the 5th largest and fastest growing city in the country, a fact that we tout and is very exciting. It's incredibly important that we make sure the workers who are at the front line of building and growing that city are fairly compensated for the great work that they're doing to help us gain that status. This is something that will benefit every single construction worker in the city, whether or not they are represented by a labor union. I think that's an important fact to mention when talking about a prevailing wage. It also would signal that Phoenix stands by its workers, especially in a time when housing costs and homelessness are at the top of mind for residents and everyday needs are far more expensive than they used to be. It's beyond time that we make sure that wages are keeping up with those rising costs. As has been mentioned, this has been a long process. Discussions around a prevailing wage have been going on before I was on the city council, and I am proud to have made my steadfast support of this very clear. In recent months, I've had the opportunity to talk to a wide variety of membership of labor unions, from the carpenters to the iron workers to electricians, and it's been wonderful to just better understand the day-to-day impacts that a prevailing wage ordinance like this one would have, specifically on some nuanced issues like payroll fraud that sometimes we don't think about, but this ordinance helps to address and will really make an impact in people's lives. I also want to note that while this would be a big step forward, the work must continue after this. The Biden administration has made this issue a priority in their labor agenda, but they've also noted that the Davis-Bacon prevailing wage regulations have not been comprehensively updated in more than 40 years, leaving many workers paid less than actually intended by the act. So cities like Phoenix, which has benefited immensely from infrastructure investments from the bipartisan infrastructure bill, from the Inflation Reduction Act, and the CHIPS Act, and so many others, we want to make sure that we are keeping these local dollars in our economy. I'm also grateful one of the other challenges throughout this process has been legal questions around the legality, and last year Attorney General Mays put out an opinion about prevailing wage and indicated that cities and towns can enact their own local prevailing wage laws, which has allowed this conversation to move forward as well. And finally, I want to applaud the requirements for apprenticeship programs that are in this ordinance. This will help deliver the next generation of skilled workers in the construction sector, something that is sorely needed as we work to build a competitive workforce. And then finally, I just want to highlight, I'm very glad to see the compliance staff that has been incorporated into the ordinance. I think that's going to be essential to make sure we're actually keeping folks accountable and making sure that this ordinance is doing exactly what it was intended to do. So thank you to staff, thank you to all of the labor leaders who've been involved in this process, to every stakeholder who's been involved. You've been crucial and your advocacy has been crucial. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Waring.
Thank you, Mayor. Jeff, does this impact utilities, Southwest Gas, APS, et cetera? How are they impacted?
Councilmember Waring, as currently constructed, this ordinance would only apply to construction projects in which we, the City of Phoenix, are the lead. It would not extend itself beyond that.
So it doesn't affect them at all?
It does not.
But they have construction workers who work for them, so this wouldn't affect their wages at all?
It would not, as currently constructed, no.
Okay. All right, on page 12, it talks about increasing our costs, I think, of our general fund at a time where our revenues are about to be cut because of actions by the legislature in the last legislative session, which obviously impacts our budget. So we are impacting costs at a time where we're also concerned about the loss of revenue.
Mayor, members of the council, Councilman Waring, based on the assumptions that we put into this, we estimate that the annual impact is roughly $17 million. The thing to remember about the CIP, within the CIP, there are lump sum projects, and those are projects that there's a bucket of money essentially for a variety of different projects. And so there's opportunity to scale those projects back and change some of those. So some of that cost could be mitigated, and the staff costs would also then be charged to the CIP. So there's a way to recapture some of that. And I'll let Amber and Eric weigh in if they want to add anything to what I just said.
Thank you, Jeff. Councilman Waring, Mayor, members of the council, it wouldn't have a direct impact to our general fund budget, which is what is really being impacted by the actions by the state. So as Jeff indicated, even the ongoing operating costs for the 14 new positions would get charged out to the CIP. So it does have a cost impact to capital projects, but it wouldn't have a direct impact to our general fund budget that we're constructing right now that'll be bringing to the council later in February for next fiscal year.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Amber. But based on what Jeff just said, you know, if you have, this up, but 5 projects and you have to slash 17 million out of them, you're either going to get a less good project, or you have a project that had an inflated cost to begin with. If you can just so easily whack some of the costs, we should be doing that anyway. It's going to have or we're going to be doing fewer projects. We're going to get rid of a $17 million project somewhere that's going to be important to somebody, or again, if it's so easy to get rid of it, what the heck was it doing in there in the first place?
And Mayor and Council, one thing I'd like to, again, kind of emphasize is we made a variety of assumptions to come up to that number. And, you know, one of the things that I learned in doing the research initially when I wrote the first white paper for you guys, some of this prevailing wage discussion and some of the results of some of the national studies that are cited in our report as well as others, the impact is really skewed in the favor of who's ultimately asking for the study. So sometimes when you see studies on the benefit of labor, they skew to the labor side. On contractors, they skew to the contract side. What we tried to be, as budget and research has to play that role, and I still kind of wear that hat, is try to be fair and impartial. And so what we tried to do is, based on the assumptions that we made, just really look at what we think the impact could be. But as we talked about, it's really going to be hard to go back and say this project would have cost more. I think there are good arguments to be made that if you're paying folks, you know, a better wage, you have less work-involved injuries, you have a better work product in the end. All those things are true, and you have possibly less change orders. So some of those things would offset, theoretically, some of those cost escalations or those cost increases that we're talking about. I wouldn't say necessarily that we have a CIP that has projects in it that shouldn't be in there. Budget and research goes through a very arduous process of ensuring that the CIP that we have are things that are needed, and that in the course of developing that CIP for those enterprise departments, the CIP is then again looked at from a fund availability standpoint to make sure that the enterprise rates that are currently being, you know, collected support that CIP. So I think what we're saying is we want everyone to be open that there is an impact, but the actual impact, I don't know that we definitively know that. So we've made a variety of assumptions, and again, are they accurate? The truth will come, you know, over time, but I do think we get a better product if our workers are compensated better.
Thank you, Mayor. Jeff, if it's 17.5 million or 18 million, I'm not going to call you on the carpet and scream bloody murder. Don't worry. I wouldn't focus so much on that. My point was really more, you know, if you're taking those costs, if you're raising the costs, then something has to go. I'm in no way saying there's something in the CIP that, you know, they may not be all my first choices of projects, but they're in there for a reason, and people will presumably miss them if they're gone, and if they're not gonna miss them, then they shouldn't have been in there. But I definitely think scaling back the projects, you know, that also has some implications. I mean, I'm just trying to point out nothing's free.
Correct.
This is not free. I think we agree about that.
We do.
You highlighted that on page 11 when you talked about, we're not going to have this for affordable housing because it'll raise the cost and then it might not be so affordable. That was a telling point right there. We're acknowledging that the cost of everything and then it's going to go up at a time of high inflation. Right. So that, I mean, you talked about the potential positive ripple effects. There also then, by that rationale, could be negative ripple effects that we also have to acknowledge. So I think this is going to pass today. There's been a long discussion. I remember well your sticker shock when I think it passed in March or whenever it was. But at least at this point, it's had, you know, some more due diligence and analysis and so forth. You're the budget person, you and Amber, and you've been able to sit down and work on it. So that gives at least some comfort. Again, I'm not holding you to the 17 million, but at least it's a ballpark. I mean, last time I think we were just throwing numbers around, and you were like, I don't know, I'm kind of just making stuff up on the fly. It wasn't your fault, it wasn't your plan. But so at least that part's better. But I wanted to make sure the questions about the utilities were understood by everybody. We do a lot of work with them. They're our partners. Frankly, without them, where would we be as a city? If we didn't have air conditioning and water, we'd be kind of up a creek. So I just want to make sure that they understand where they stand and that there are going to be some costs that are going to escalate because of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to understand a little bit more about one of the comments on the contractor stakeholder input page is that our city's current contract stipulations already forbid labor broker practices. What were our enforcement policies related to that?
Mayor, members of council, so we do have a provision in the contract that says that contractors aren't allowed to go through labor brokers to hire additional staff, that they need to use staff that is employees of theirs, or they can also have independent contractors. But at this point, that there isn't really an enforcement action associated with that. It just says that thou shalt not do that, but there isn't an enforcement in there. So now this ordinance would then provide additional positive encouragement to have them not follow along with that. So currently, we put it in there in hopes that they would follow along with it. We haven't heard that they haven't been, but at this point, there isn't an enforcement with that.
So there's no, and in the ordinance that is up for vote today, can you remind me what the penalties are for not following this ordinance if it's passed?
All right, Mayor, members of council. So in section 3455, it talks about the different sanctions, and it talks about that if we, after the 60-day period, we were to determine that there was some restitution necessary, that the restitution would be repaid back, liquidated damages up to 3 times the amount of whatever the wages were owed. A directive, we could also withhold payment until such items had been corrected. We could also rescind the contract in question, right? So if we determine through that we've allowed them to try to remedy it and then they don't, we could actually cancel the contract. And then it goes on to say that then if they do that more than once, right, if in a 3-year period, that then we could actually debar them from pursuing City of Phoenix work, and then we could fine them in an amount up to, or of no less than 3% of the total contract amount. So.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, because I know that when I first came on council and met with some of the union folks, that actually was their biggest complaint and felt like that would make steps towards making labor, costs better for them. So it's a little frustrating that we had to come all the way to this point to actually get enforcement efforts to a stipulation we had in our contracts. I have strong concerns about the fact that this ordinance language will still be deemed illegal. I realize the Attorney General released an opinion in 2023. However, that opinion doesn't carry the same weight as a court in determining what is and isn't illegal. State law is clear. We cannot pass a prevailing wage, and regardless of the current AG's opinion, I believe this is against state law. Already, the Arizona General Contractors released a statement that they will sue as soon as they can should this pass. I'm of the firm belief that the prevailing wage is not the same as a minimum wage. For those reasons, I will be voting no and encourage other council members to vote no to avoid costly lawsuits. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Stark.
It's okay. You can call me Councilwoman. First off, I do want to thank staff. I know this was a lot of work, and I know we are a council divided on this issue. And Councilwoman Waring brought up the $17 million that it may cost, but I think it's going to cost us more because, as Councilwoman O'Brien pointed out, the Arizona general contractors have already said they're going to sue us. So we're going to spend more money. This isn't the first lawsuit we've seen and won't be the last, surely. And I do appreciate everything you've done. I do believe we should pay a livable wage, and I had hoped that we would have looked at it through a minimum wage rather than prevailing wage. I do agree with Councilwoman O'Brien that although we have a very smart Attorney General, I do disagree with her on this. I do think prevailing wage is different than minimum wage. And so I wish we had gone down the path of looking at a minimum wage in our contracts. Unfortunately, we didn't do that, and I understand that would have been labor-intensive. This is also labor-intensive through prevailing wage. And so I still have a whole host of concerns, and I cannot support this. I do hope, though, in the future we still continue to have that dialogue about a minimum wage in our contracts. I think that's an important discussion. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hodge-Washington.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to start off again by saying thank you to city staff, the city manager, your staff, and everyone, all of our stakeholders that participated in this process. When I came on board, unfortunately, one of my first votes was to actually repeal this, and the basis for that repeal was because I saw some procedural and substantive concerns regarding the ordinance as presented. From a procedural standpoint, I think we no longer have that. And from a substantive standpoint, I think because of the Attorney General's opinion that we have a little bit more clarity, but we won't have the final clarity until the court actually rules on it. For me, one of the things I would like to see us consider in the implementation of this ordinance, if it does go forward, is to actually have some method of evaluating and reviewing the effectiveness of this ordinance. I think, as noted in our packet, in the information, the data is based on who is presenting the survey results. And I think we owe it to ourselves to actually evaluate this if we move forward with it, to determine whether or not this process is actually giving us the outcomes that we are looking for as a city. I also believe that individuals should be paid, compensated for their work in a manner that is reflective of the industry that they are in. But I also want to make sure that we are truly addressing a problem that our city has. So I just want to make sure that that's on the record, that we need to definitely have some level of evaluation for this ordinance if it moves forward. I do acknowledge that we have been threatened with litigation has been threatened based on this ordinance, and we will have to see what comes of that. I won't profess to opine on that. Our city attorneys will be the one to respond to that. But I want to make sure that as we move forward, we are making sure that this is actually working and meeting the goals in which we hope for it to address. So if we can have some level of, it could be annual review of what it is that we're encountering so that we as city council know exactly what the net effect of this. Right now we are walking into possibly uncharted territory, and I think we need to have the data to understand how it affects us going forward. So thank you. That's it, Mayor.
And Mayor, if I may, to that point, one of the things that we've talked about, I believe we mentioned it at briefings, but we didn't talk about it here, is I would suggest and recommend that we do a postmortem on this like every 12 to 18 months or something like that so that we can evaluate it. As Eric talked about, this is a phased implementation, so we may learn things that allow us to change the threshold, move it down, do all kinds of different things as it pertains to it as we learn and get more, skilled at navigating it. So that would definitely be something that we would be looking to do.
Thank you. I think an annual evaluation probably would be very helpful. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm proud of what we've done at the City of Phoenix to support those who are working for our city and make sure that they are getting a fair wage. At my first formal meeting as mayor, we voted to give our full-time employees a $15 an hour minimum wage. Then we did that for part-time employees later in the year. We've looked comprehensively at compensation and have also added up to 12 weeks of family leave. All of these were the right things to do. Now we're considering an important next step, making sure that those who work on city-sponsored construction projects, those who are building the future of Phoenix, are paid a decent and fair wage. I want to thank the city manager and his entire team that worked to make this ordinance possible. It's not the result of a single council vote, but months of outreach and stakeholder meetings with those who would be impacted by this kind of law. We have an ordinance that is workable and keeps the commitments we made to Phoenix voters, including through our general obligation bond. Not only that, but it's an ordinance that makes Phoenix much more competitive for much-needed federal funds from the Inflation Reduction Act. We've heard from contractors that they are right now paying above the prevailing wage. This vote could become particularly important if we see a major downturn in the economy where we don't want city projects to be depressing wages. I know there have been questions raised around the legal issues, but we have received an opinion from our state's chief legal officer, Attorney General Chris Mays, who says this is absolutely something that cities can do. Not only is Phoenix relying on that opinion, but Phoenix will vote on a nearly identical option later today because of that opinion as well. So I want to thank the city staff for their hard work to craft this ordinance and express my gratitude to the unions, construction companies, and contractors who met with us to share their thoughts over the last several months. Any additional comments before we go to public comment? All right, we will now go to public comment. You have up to 2 minutes to address. We'll begin with Luke Douglas, followed by Mike Gardner.
Mayor and Council, thank you so much. My name is Luke Douglas. I live at Central and Baseline in South Phoenix, and I'm here today on behalf of the Arizona Building and Construction Trades Council. It's been a long process to get here, and a lot has already been said, so instead of saying something that's already been said, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to the Mayor and Council for initiating this process of drafting the ordinance and bringing in a professional mediator who can make sure that every stakeholder's needs are heard out. Thank you to the city manager and staff. I know that this is never a straightforward process, implementing what has already been the law at the federal level for nearly a century and making it real at the city level. Thank you to the mediator. It's been a pleasure working through all the steps of the process, and to all our labor brothers and sisters here to celebrate what should be a very big day for working families here in Phoenix. So thank you all, and we look forward to seeing this implemented.
Thank you. Mike is next, followed by Jason Sangster.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. My name is Mike Gardner. I represent the Arizona Builders Alliance. We're about 350 general construction contractors. So we're small, medium, large, union and non-union. So I give you that context to help you understand we come at this with clean hands. We're not pro-union, we're not anti-union. What we're looking for is an opportunity for all of our companies to have an opportunity to win and bid on city contracts. The problem we see with this legislation is multifold. Number one, we're still trying to identify the problem that exists in the marketplace, that government action is needed. When we went to the stakeholder meetings, that was the first question we asked, and still waiting for a definitive answer as to what problem exists in the marketplace that the government needs to step in and say we need to adjust the prevailing wage in this, create a prevailing wage in the city of Phoenix. Wages in the construction trades today are the highest they've ever been. We've got companies that are, starting wages are $20 an hour. A lot of our companies are paying at least $70,000, $80,000, or $90,000 a year for skilled labor. That's an incredible wage today. What problem are we trying to solve? We're not quite sure. But I want to make sure that we also point out the flaws that we see with this legislation. Number one, it is costly. It is $17 million. It has to come from something. You're either going to have to give up on a construction project, or you're going to have to, are the costs are going to go up even more. But more importantly, we think this is going to hurt small businesses. There's going to be many businesses that are part of my association that won't be able to bid on and win a city contract in the future. That's unfair to them. They're just trying to earn their own living wage, and now we're cutting them out of the process. Last, let me talk about the legal side of this. The AG didn't weigh in on this, but I think she missed an important point. The voters in the state of Arizona through Proposition 202 did allow a city to pass a minimum wage, and we encourage you to look at that. That is completely legal. It is illegal, though, to pass a prevailing wage, and that's what we stand opposed to this legislation as it stands.
Thank you. Jason is next, followed by Josh Umar.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Jason Sangster. I'm the business manager, financial secretary for Ironworkers Local 75. Ironworkers Local 75 was established in 1910 and have had a hall in Phoenix since 1950. I am here on behalf of 1,000 Arizona ironworkers to ask you to please pass prevailing wage in the city of Phoenix. Arizona ironworkers, prevailing wage was signed into law in 1931. Several cities across the country have enacted their own prevailing wage ordinance, just like the voters have gave you the authority to pass in 2016. Simply put, prevailing wage is a minimum wage for construction workers. Prevailing wage deters wage theft, encourages individuals to join the trades. One of the biggest problems Phoenix is facing is homelessness. As recent studies have shown, people are not being homeless because they are addicted to drugs or alcohol, but because they are not making enough money to afford rent. So if we want to reduce the number of people experiencing homelessness while putting more money back into the local economy, please pass prevailing wage. I guarantee you ironworkers will take that money they earn building these projects and pay their mortgage, buy food for their family, shoes for their children. Passing prevailing wage will help all of Phoenix construction workers be able to afford to live in the city they are proudly building while boosting the local economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Josh is next, followed by Mark Cardenas.
Thank you very much, Mayor, council members. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Josh Umar. I'm the executive director of the ASA of Arizona, also here representing Arizona's for Fair Contracting. We were a part of the City of Phoenix stakeholder process on this issue. Incredibly grateful to have been included in that. Feel like it was worthwhile. Unfortunately, we do come out the other side of it still opposed to the final product. A good portion of my members are sort of emerging small minority-owned contractors. We think that they're going to be the ones that are hurt the most by the passage of this ordinance. And as Mike Gardner alluded to, we kind of think it's a solution in search of a problem, if you will. To sort of confirm this, we went through and did a survey among our membership. More than 50 of our members responded, demonstrated that they're already paying their employees a highly competitive, above average wage that exceeds many other industries in the state. Importantly, 41% of the people that responded to that survey that we did were companies that had 50 or fewer employees. They were open shop, union, represented every area of the industry. And the most important part that came out of it for me, as I try to do the best thing I can do by my members, was that of the 60% of the companies that responded to our survey that are already bidding municipal work, 44% said that they would not continue to do so if a prevailing wage ordinance was passed, and another 32% were unsure. That's almost 75%. Of the 60% of companies that are already bidding municipal work. And the reason that they gave was the administrative burdens associated with prevailing wage requirements. And so we have a lot of legitimate, stable contractors in my membership, people who have already done work for the city and completed it with high quality and top safety records. And we feel like they will be shut out of the process. So with that being said, I do urge you to vote against it. And again, thank you so much to you all and to the staff for including us in that stakeholder process.
Thank you. Mark is next, followed by Ricardo Carlo.
Mayor Gallego, honorable members of the Phoenix City Council, Mark Cardenas with the Sheet Metal Workers Local 359 and Boilermakers Local 627. First wanted to thank you for your diligence and for seeing this process through, and also to Mr. Barton and his staff. I know they spent a lot of time on this, so your work on this is much appreciated. Before my comments, I wanted to rebut one of the comments that was said earlier related to one of the gentlemen representing one of the contractor associations, mentioned that they do represent union and non-union contractors. and how it impacts them. And I wanted to respond with that. His union contractors and non-union contractors now will be able to bid on city contracts on a level playing field. So that creates a net benefit for his workers, people who are paying their hard-earned dollars into his association and his salary. Having prevailing wage in the city of Phoenix ensures employers are able to fulfill all manpower requests that are going out that are sent to the construction workers that are sitting behind me. Prevailing wage helps apprenticeship programs, encourages robust training, minimizes disruptions to local labor markets, and ensures that our construction workers can continue to recruit, construction unions can continue to recruit Phoenicians into their construction apprenticeships. So I urge members of the City Council to pass prevailing wage so all workers can share in the construction boom that is happening in the city of Phoenix. Thank you.
Ricardo Carlo is next, followed by Andres Soto.
Mayor, council, and staff, thank you for all the work that you put into this. We've been part of the stakeholder call, and we asked for that early on in the beginning, have stakeholders involved in this instead of just labor unions. So, again, I want to thank you all for your hard work that you did, but I want to highlight on a couple of things. One is the city had mentioned that the fact that the administrative costs and the burden it would take to bring this program into place. You're passing that same cost onto these small businesses as well who don't have that cost to do. The other thing to say that you don't have skilled workers, who do you think built this building and all these processes throughout the state? Our workers in the state of Arizona, and they weren't all union, so they are skilled workers. Our members have weekly and daily tool talks to talk about the safety on the project, so the safety is eminent in there. The other thing is that they do pay above with the prevailing wage. The other thing is that if the prevailing wage is passed, some of these employees that are making, say, $20 an hour, and all of a sudden prevailing wage calls for $18 an hour, that employer is going to have to tell them you're going to have to take a cut in pay because this is what is calling for the job. So that's what we're looking at this overall thing. Now, the thing is, prevailing wage is a federal program. We understand that. We know all about it. It's been around for 91 years. We understand the Davis-Bacon Act and everything else. But the fact is that a lot of these small businesses, like was mentioned by my counterpart earlier, Josh, that they will not do prevailing wage work. They refuse to do it. They used to do it. They refuse to do it because of the administrative burden that it takes. So again, eliminating these small businesses for competing on city projects. And they've been one of the major factors in growing city projects. So again, I ask you to please, look at this fairly and honestly and listen to the comments that have been made today on both sides. But in my fact, our organization, we oppose it. So again, thank you all for your hard work.
Thank you. Andres is next, followed by Mike Huckins.
Good afternoon, City Council. So my name is Andres Soto. I'm a Phoenix resident, born and raised, and I'm a journeyman electrician member of IBW Local 640. So I've had the privilege of working in the metropolitan area on some of the largest projects happening in and around the city amongst workers of various backgrounds and trades, both union members and non-union members as well. And it's through this experience I'm here today to encourage the City Council to approve the prevailing wage measure before you. So this measure supports workers who build and maintain our growing city and community, and it also attracts skilled labor to the Phoenix area. So the end result is a net positive for the city as a whole. As we all know, the city has grown. As the city has grown, so too is the burden on local families who live with increased costs of essentials like groceries, rent, and home prices. This measure will go a long way to ensure that those who contribute to and build our city are paid the appropriate wages in order to live and thrive in the city. So the measure goes beyond simple monetary value, so it'll help to maintain construction workers who've moved here looking for opportunity, as well as Phoenicians who live here and all their lives building the city. So this will encourage those workers and their families to shop at local stores and eat at local restaurants, encouraging small business and a healthy economy overall. It promotes safer work environments and encourages training in trade schools, which are necessary for Phoenix to compete among other growing cities, especially as the greater metro area becomes a hub of high technology. So for those reasons, I encourage the City Council to pass the measure. It's not just potentially a much-needed raise for many, but a statement that the city, having embraced growth, is now ready to make an investment in the community and encourage that community to more comfortably grow roots in the city. So thank you for your time.
Mike is next, followed by Raquel Teran.
Thank you, Mayor and Council members. Mike Hutkins with the Greater Phoenix Chamber, here again in respectful opposition to the ordinance presented before you today. I'll keep my comments brief. I know you've all heard from me many times on this issue before, but I'd like to start off by again thanking Jeff, as others have done, and the entire staff team here at the City of Phoenix for including us in the stakeholder process, and most importantly, having what we believe was a fair stakeholder process. So thank you, Jeff, for that. Again, as some of the others stated, we believe that prevailing wage ordinances have a chilling effect on businesses bidding for these types of projects. That's unfortunate, especially on small businesses, because we want those small businesses to be successful. The other main point is the additional administrative cost to the city, whether it comes out of the general fund or the capital improvement funds. A dollar is a dollar in our opinion, and it's unfortunate that we have to get here today to see those precious city dollars being used on this ordinance, where we believe they could be used in more effective manners. With that, Mayor and Council members, thank you for your time today. We do respectfully oppose the ordinance, but again, thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Raquel is next, followed by Aaron.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council, and I'm just going to take a few seconds to acknowledge that women on the council. Pretty amazing to see so many women on the council, even though I know I don't align with everybody. It's pretty awesome. So thank you, Mayor and Council, for bringing this matter to a vote. It is a great opportunity to do the right thing for the workers and for the city of Phoenix and the voters of the state of Arizona. My name is Raquel Teran, and I'm here to stand in solidarity with labor unions and community organizations as a resident, as an activist, as a community organizer, former legislator representing Central Phoenix, which has the lowest median income in Arizona, and that district would be incredibly benefited by an ordinance like this. Strong workforces make for strong communities. Labor unions, grassroots organizations, and workers have kept this city moving. It is important that the council acknowledge their contributions and pass a prevailing wage ordinance. I am proud to have been part of the coalition led by Leaving United for Change, Lucha, that worked to pass Proposition 206, which is known for raising the minimum wage, but also gave municipalities latitude in establishing wages, plural, as in more than one minimum wage in their jurisdiction. Thankfully, this law that was passed clearly cited by the Arizona Attorney General, Chris Mace, acknowledging the authorities of cities to make this decision before you today. So these are our friends, these are our neighbors, these are the people that are investing their skills and labor in our communities. We are seeing that people that work in the city cannot afford to live here as well. We don't want to see them have to leave to another state to get fair compensation. So let's show them that good work will be celebrated here in Arizona. Thank you to the Mayor and Council. We appreciate your leadership, and we hope to have a unanimous vote for this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron is next, followed by Ricardo Villafon.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. I really appreciate all the due diligence that's been done on this matter. There's clearly been a great deal of effort put forth by all of you guys, and I really appreciate that. I'm an electrician, journeyman wireman, 20 years, IBW. I happen to be union. I'm already under prevailing wage. I'll always get paid that. I still believe this is the right thing to do. Whether it affects me or not, it's right to pay everybody prevailing wage. There has been brought up minimum wage and prevailing wage. Here's the difference. Minimum wage goes to everybody. Prevailing wage is specifically targeted to each person and their unique ability and skill set in order to compensate them for their knowledge and skill in the work that they do. That's why I hope that you guys are able to pass this legislation today to fairly compensate us for all the work that we do that is very difficult in this state. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ricardo is next, followed by Theron.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Mayor. Hello to the Phoenix City Council. My name is Ricardo Villafan. I'm here to speak in favor of the prevailing wage decision coming up, and I want to say that this decision, if passed, would benefit the city in many ways, such as having growth in our local economy, spending our local dollars in our local small businesses, attracting talent in the trades, finishing projects in a timely manner, and skilled tradesmen teaching young local apprentices working in the city, such as myself. As someone who was born and raised in the west side of Phoenix, I've seen the city grow, and seeing the decisions made by the city to positive benefits has made me love to, incentivize for myself to stay here. Working my way up in the electrical trade, doing everything I can to learn in hopes of owning my own home. And as I already bought myself a new truck, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I got up my mom's insurance and went out to trade school while working on my own. So I do think that if this prevailing wage does pass, not only has it already been benefiting me in the trades, but it'll benefit everybody else wanting to learn the trade and wanting to work in the city of Phoenix to finish these projects. So I hope each one of you votes yes, and let's get this prevailing wage passed. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. I want to emphasize the critical importance of implementing a prevailing wage in the city of Phoenix for the construction workers. The construction industry is the backbone of the growth of this city. We develop everything. A prevailing wage ensures that the workers receive a baseline standard of pay, reflecting the cost of living in the region. This isn't the same that's going to be in California. This isn't the same that's going to be in Utah. This isn't the same. It's calculated for your region of cost of living. That's what it's for, so people can live. Moreover, a prevailing wage promotes a level playing field within the construction sector. It prevents unfair competition by discouraging undercutting of wages to secure contracts, and that's what's been going on for years. This in turn creates a more stable and skilled workforce. In implementing a prevailing wage, we set a powerful message that Phoenix is committed to its workforce and sustainable growth. Together, let us build not only physical structures, but also a city that values and uplifts the hardworking women and men who construct its foundation. One other thing, Councilwoman Pastor is 100% on the history of this ordinance. I've been here since the beginning. And if you're scared of the AGC, just YouTube the beautiful Miss Coral Evans out of Flagstaff Mayor. She'll tell you how to handle them. And to up threshold to 4 million, you will be 3 times higher than the national average. 3 to 4 times higher. To uplift the threshold is ridiculous to $4 million. Thank you.
Thank you. That is all of our registered speakers for today. Additional comments or questions from my colleagues? Councilwoman Guardado.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to take a moment to thank all the workers and the apprenticeship students that are here today. Thank you so much for being out here. I know as a former worker, I know it takes courage. It takes a lot out of you to come out here and be humble and talk to us about your experience and what everything that you guys have gone through. So thank you for coming out and putting some light into this issue. Very, very excited to see all of you guys speak and being out here. So thank you guys. Thank you so much. And very happy to be able to support this today. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hodge-Washington.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a question. I'm not sure if staff is able to answer it, but one of the comments we heard repeatedly was the administrative burden and the impact on small and minority businesses, and I just wanted to see I want to hear your response to that, please.
Councilwoman, Mayor, members of the council, I'll start it and I'll defer to staff. Part of the research that we've done, again, it constantly is this allusion to the administrative burden with trying to comply with certified payroll, with trying to make sure that you go through all the hoops that are embedded in this ordinance or any other ordinance such as Davis-Bacon. One of the reasons, not only because it ties to our JOC threshold, the $4 million for us was also about trying to protect our small and minority-owned businesses. Generally speaking, they bid on the smaller contracts, and so by raising that threshold, we felt like we were lifting to some degree the administrative burden and trying to do our best to protect those small and minority-owned businesses. Eric, Amber, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call.
Ansari?
Yes.
Guardado?
Yes.
Hodge-Washington?
Yes.
O'Brien?
No.
Pastor?
I'm going to explain my vote
Please
before I go. As a teacher, and as a teacher, part of a union, I understand what it means to be able to have wages and be able to support my family and also be able to support my community in the sense of when there's need in the community. What I also understand is, as former Phoenix Union board member, I was part of voting for prevailing wage at Phoenix Union. In that process, I heard the same story or same argument, maybe not story, argument. However, Phoenix Union continues to build projects. Phoenix Union continues to stay within their budget. Phoenix Union is doing the right thing and did the right thing. So today, as I have been advocating for 4 years, I will do the right thing and vote yes.
Robinson?
Mayor, if I can briefly explain my
Please do.
decision. Thank you. In the past several weeks, there's only one other issue that I've received more phone calls, emails, letters, text messages on other than this issue surrounding prevailing wage, and that was all the issues surrounding the DOJ. And when I say it's in the hundreds, I think that would be a generous, on the low side, a generous number of contacts I've received or inquiries I've received. What I've heard from the 12 or so speakers, it's kind of divided there, and based on what the city manager's office has presented to us, what I do know is that any fair negotiation requires compromise on everyone's part. And what I'm hearing from everyone is that not everyone is in complete agreement with what has been proposed. That to me sounds like it's a fair agreement, you know, from my perspective, because not everybody is getting everything they want, but everybody is getting a little bit of what they want. And for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and vote yes on this particular issue. Thank you, Mayor.
Waring? Stark?
No.
Gallego?
Yes.
Passes 6-3.
Phoenix is now the first city in the state of Arizona to pass a prevailing wage ordinance. We are adjourned.
So if you would like to enjoy what was once a pie factory, come on down to McKinley and Grand Avenue.
Bienvenidos a Phoenix en un minuto, más o menos. El día